Come out with us and play. Love your London. Have a banana. Welcome to the second instalment of our Love Your London episodes on Alexandra Palace to Muswell Hill. Last week was all about the station. This week is all about the fascinating history of Alexandra Palace itself, its role as an internment camp during the First World War, and its place in television history. 196 acres, so it's a pretty large park. Now, Alexandra herself, she was actually a Dane. Her full name was Alexandra Caroline Marie Charlotte Louise Julia of Schleswig-Holstein Soderberg Gluckberg. So, bit of a mouthful. As you can hear, I'm out of breath just by saying it. Okay, so it's quite hilly. So I will have to keep stopping every now and then because it does get quite. It's quite a bit of a hill this way. In fact, it's a lot hillier than going on the road. But basically, as I said, Princess Alexandra married the Prince of Wales, Prince Edward, who became Edward VII, the son of Queen Victoria. She herself was daughter of who was to become, actually on the same year that they got married, King Christian the IX of Denmark. When the young Princess Alexandra in Denmark, in Copenhagen, was a little girl, she would have Hans Christian Andersen come to read her bedtime stories. So her great grandchildren, that's George, Charlotte and Louisa, is it? Louis. David Williams, if you're watching, perhaps there's a good gig in there for you. Should have a word with your agent. Might even become Lord Williams one day. Prince Edward and Princess Alexandra got married in 1863. And she became, as the wife of the first son of the ruling monarch, the Princess of Wales. And she actually held that title for a whopping 38 years until Victoria died in 1901. It was really because of that Alexandra Palace became the name of this palace and the park instead of the People's Palace, which was the original title. Now, when the palace opened in 1873, it was a huge event. Over 100,000 people turned up to hear Sim Reeves, the opera singer, give a performance. 16 days after opening, the palace was gutted by a fire, and it took them 2 years to rebuild it. It's a real shame because inside the palace there was also a huge exhibition of historical English porcelain and pottery. So when it was rebuilt and it was reopened 2 years later, there was a theatre and a concert hall, and it became an all-round entertainment venue. And then in 1900, to ensure that it always remained in the use of the public, a committee bought it to save it from redevelopment and ordained that it must be available for the free use and recreation of the people forever. Now, that statement is very important because it's something that the campaigners have always quoted in order to try and save it from being redeveloped. As with everything in London, people have been trying to redevelop the palace for forever, really. In fact, the whole reason why this charity was set up in 1900 was to prevent it from being redeveloped. Now, ironically, when the First World War started, it actually became anything but a place for free use and recreation. In 1915, it became an internment camp, basically a place where Austrian, Hungarian and mainly German residents in the UK were kept as prison. I mean, they were basically locked up. It was a prison, even though it was meant to be. They weren't actually meant to be enemies of the people as such, but because of their German passport, they were considered a security risk, and also they would have possibly been attacked by the very hostile crowd because of the fact that they were German, maybe had a German accent. They were men, normally of age, that they could go to Germany to fight. So they weren't allowed to leave as part of the Aliens Restriction Act. That's what it was called. They weren't allowed to leave. There was, in fact, I think one person who did leave, a guy called Kurt Engler, and there's a poem about him if you look up online. I'll put the details down there. He was a hairdresser in here, and he escaped. He's one of the only people, maybe the only person, who managed to escape Alexandra Palace to try and find his wife. Discovered that his wife had not been faithful to him while he was being interred, and actually checked himself back into the palace. But there's a poem down there. It's really sweet little poem. Do have a look at it. And as it happens, Kurt Engler's son was an old friend of my dad's. They used to play jazz together. So nice little story there. Little connection. It was a very musical place as well. There was a 40-strong orchestra led by Anton Wust, that's W-U with an umlaut S-T. He actually composed the Alexandra Palace ragtime in there, but they would put on lots of concerts to try and lift morale for the people inside. Okay, so as you can see, that big mast behind me. So after the war, the palace reverted to being a theatre. But it was in 1935 when it started to be used as a new centre by the BBC for producing and transmitting television. And the very first programming started in 1936. So, funny enough, in a little bit like when the start of VCRs started, and there was that big thing between VHS and Betamax, there was a format war even back then in 1936. There were two versions of television. One was John Logie Bird's version, which was 240 lines, and the other one was the much more, so-called high-definition version, which was 405 lines, and that was the format by Marconi-EMI. The funny thing is, when television started in 1936, the BBC, impartial as ever, they had to decide which format they were going to use for the very first bit of programming, and it was decided, even though the Marconi's format was obviously the superior one, it was decided on a coin toss, and John Logie Bird's version won the coin toss. So what they decided to do was, for the first 6 months, they were going to alternate every week and have programming on John Logie Bird's version and then programming on Marconi-EMI's version, and do that and alternate it every week. However, I think it was just only about 3 months when they decided, hang on, this is rubbish. We're just going to stick with the good version. Now, obviously, that probably would have not been very good for the people who had the old version televisions, but we're not really talking about a lot of people. I mean, the ownership of private televisions in houses was very much a rich person's thing. I mean, the people who had televisions were very wealthy. They probably could have afforded to upgrade their technology quite easily. So that 200-foot mast over there could really only transmit to up to 40 miles. And in reality, not very many people outside London had a television, to be honest. So you're talking about a few low thousands of people who actually own television and who actually watch those programs. Now, if you go online, there is an absolutely fantastic bit of footage from the very first day. But obviously, it's not actually recorded it's not the actual footage itself, because they didn't have the ability to tape it. But British Pathé were there to film the very first transmission from the BBC, so we actually see what people saw. Now, I can't actually show it to you in this video, because even though this is so old, from 1936, British Pathé still has the copyright. So there's just going to be a link at the end of this video, so do stay for the end of the video. There's going to be a link where you'll be able to watch the original. Adèle Dixon is the lady who was commissioned to sing a song, an ode to television, which is what you'll be seeing in that clip. It's a lovely little tune. It's really sweet. In fact, in the comments below, you'll see. I'm going to put the lyrics so you can read the lyrics of the song. Okay, so we're in the London Borough of Haringey here, and the official coat of arms, which you can now see on your screen, has got these 8 rays. And they obviously refer to the signal that's coming from the top of this mast. Now, there is an absolutely amazing collection of equipment in the old BBC studios that are still in this building. You can sort of visit them to this day on very rare occasions. I actually went there a few years ago on London Open House, and you'll see the original cameras and TV sets. It's perhaps one of the most interesting little collections for television aficionados out there. I really recommend it if you get a chance, but you're probably going to have to wait for London Open House, which of course was cancelled this year because of this stupid COVID stuff. But hopefully next year London Open House will be in full swing and you'll be able to see it. There aren't very many occasions that you can see it. You can if you become sort of like a friend, or you can sort of like go to sort of monthly volunteer events and you can go and see it. And apart from the old cameras, they actually have in there the very first, or one of the very first 3D televisions. And did you know that 3D television was already invented and demonstrated in 1928 by John Logie Baird? And it never caught on then. It really still hasn't even caught on now. It's a bit of a strange one, that. The 3D television you'd have thought would have caught on, but it never has, and they've been trying to push it since 1928. Okay, so I spoke a little bit earlier about the horrendous fire that happened here in 1873, 16 days after it opened. It's not been the only fire. There was a big fire here in 1980, and anyone from Muswell Hill, from Alexandra Park, from this area who was around in 1980 will very much remember it, because obviously the whole thing, I mean, it was tragic. The whole thing was ablaze. It's quite spectacular. There's lots of footage on it on YouTube if you look for it. Not now though, please. When it happened, so much of it was gutted. I mean, the only bits that were saved was the Palm Court and this bit over here, which was the BBC studios, where they still remained for a year afterwards. So anyone who saw that fire, it is imprinted on their memories for life. It must have been quite a horrific scene. But what happened next was possibly even worse than the fire itself. So after years and years of operating perfectly and happily under the GLC, or the Great London Council, and run by the charity which you remember had promised back in 1900 to make it available for the free use and recreation of the people forever, this fire happened shortly after Haringey Council took it over. Now, this is where the real tragedy happened, because Haringey Council absolutely mismanaged the rebuilding of this palace. It took them not 2 years like it took them in 1873. It took them 8 years to rebuild, and it cost £30 million, which for 1980 is an absolute fortune. But no one knows exactly where the money went, because there's no way that it would have cost £30 million. Now, Haringey Council tried to recoup the money from the charity, so the whole thing went to court. But in 1991, the Attorney General stipulated, quite rightly so, that the charity should not be expected to foot this huge bill. Haringey Council refused to accept these findings, and they decided that the charity still owed them the money. So before long, because of compound interest, that £30 million became £60 million. And there's just no way the charity can afford that, and it's been found in court that they're not liable to pay for that money. But Haringey Council have still, they really want to try and get the money back, so they have been trying to sell this place off to developers, which obviously goes right against the original wishes of the people that set up the charity to look after this place. They wanted to sell it and turn this into a massive casino, a mega casino, and they were trying to sell it to a commercial developer called Firoka Limited. And a petition took off to save Alexandra Palace. The website, savealipali.com, is still up today. In 2007, it went to the High Court, and the charity won. So Haringey Council had embarrassingly lost yet again. But they are still, to this day, not giving up, and they're still trying to recoup their losses. So this place really is under constant danger of redevelopment. Here, by the way, is the little plaque to, this is the very first high definition. Obviously high definition back then meant better than John Logie Baird's. This is 405 lines. The first high definition television service was inaugurated here by the BBC on the 2nd of November. So that was yesterday, but so that's 84 years and 1 day at the time of filming. 1 day ago, 84 years and 1 day. That's when HGTV started.
It's a bit scruffy, Tristán. This building needs work.
Well, yes, that's actually the thing. It needs a lot of. Yeah, no,
it's falling apart.
As Sharon has just said, it does need a lot of work.
Jesus, that's not.
But the problem is that's Haringey Council are
sitting on it.
They're sitting on it because they don't care. They just want to sell this off for a casino.
Yep.
I'm going to cut it there, as the last thing we want is Haringey Council on our backs. But do check out the savealleypally.com website for more details about all of this. Now, the next episode is going to be a lot less about history, as Sharon and I check out Go Ape, the very scary high-wire adventure course in Alexandra Palace, which is meant to be a lot of fun, but which I found to be completely terrifying. See you next week. From Acton Town to Wimbledon, from Brixton to Beale, love your London, have a banana.